This video is dedicated to Claire Saffitz, who created the original recipe and is just the dessert person and baker goddess on YouTube. I respect her so much, and this recipe is all in thanks to her, even though I did end up having to sort of fudge some of the ingredients because I didn't have or couldn't find either what she was using, or I just didn't really feel like going to the store to get it, so I just kind of used what I had. But it turned out really well. With her instruction, she was really incredible. So I will put her video down below and I will let you guys know what I used that was different than what she used. Like, for instance, these apples are not baking apples. I'm not actually sure what breed or species of apple this is. I went apple picking recently and had an overabundance of these really delicious, really sweet, really colorful apples, and I thought it would be perfect to make this tart with, but I wasn't sure if they were baking apples. So I went ahead and I went on a limb and I tried it anyways, even though I wasn't sure, and curiosity may have killed the cat, but satisfaction definitely brought it back in this situation, because even though I didn't know if these would be good to bake with, it turned out absolutely perfect. And you can see I'm a hot mess in this video with cutting fruit and everything. You can see comparatively to her apples, mine are straight up tiny. They're like barely the size of my palm. So I ended up using a ton more apples than she did. I think she only used 6 apples total, 3 for the filling and 3 for the topping. And I believe I used 4 for my compote and I used 5 for my topping, but I did end up having an overabundance of topping apples. So don't worry, none of the scraps are going to waste. I had them as a snack while baking, and I also left them outside for any wild animals that wanted a healthy, nice, fresh snack. There is no way in hell I'm going to explain what I'm doing for this recipe better than Claire did in hers, so I'm not going to try. However, I do want to show you guys how this came out, because I am not a professional baker, and I feel like a lot of the times when you see professional bakers like Claire Saffitz making videos on YouTube, it can feel sort of inaccessible because you probably assume that they're going to be way better at it than you, and you know, their instructions are always really clear, but at the same time I feel like as a novice I'm always messing something up, or like they're going really fast and I have to rewind it a few times, or I have to watch the video over and over again to get it right, and it can feel kind of discouraging. And I just wanted to be sort of what would it be called? A control group, right? In like an experiment, where I'm putting this recipe to the test. I'm watching the video as I'm baking this and following along and making adjustments as I need to and learning from the process. And I did nearly burn this compote, but I was able to save it before it got burnt. I removed it from the heat right away. But right here, I'm confused as to whether or not the water is actually cooked out yet. And it hadn't at that point. But once the bubbles got big and thick, I realized that that's the consistency she was talking about. So I went ahead and I loaded all my apple chunks in there for my compote, gave it a nice hearty stir, and left that to bake. I also poured in my apple cider at this point. I do want to say I used sweetened apple cider just because in my area I live very close to a very famous orchard, and I don't think they sell unsweetened apple cider, and there's nowhere to really get unsweetened apple cider where I live. I'm not sure what she means when she says unsweetened apple cider, because every cider around here, especially during the fall time, is sweetened. So I went ahead and used the sweet stuff along with the brown sugar, the butter, and the vanilla for the compote, and I did not notice anything wrong with my compote at the end. It tasted sweet, but not overly sweet and sugary. It tasted perfectly fine. And I also wasn't sure if I was supposed to take this off the heat completely as I mashed it, because I know it's supposed to keep cooking after you mash it. So I did go ahead and turn the heat off while mashing and then turned it right back on, and it continued cooking. Obviously you can see all that steam, and then the heat goes back on and it bubbles up again. So I'm pretty sure I did that right, but who knows? Again, Claire does it better, man. This is also not homemade, handmade puff pastry. This is the puff pastry you get in the freezer aisle, but I was able to let this come down to room temp so that I could mash both sheets together, because it comes in like 2 separate sheets that you can use for like 2 different meals. But I went ahead, waited for that to warm up so I could mash it together and roll it out to size, because I'm pretty sure you're just supposed to use it in like the small little sheets it gives you. You're not really supposed to roll it out or anything. But I went ahead and I broke the rules, and then I went ahead and trimmed off all the excess, which again did not go to waste. I went ahead and I made some tiny mini cinnamon rolls with this. Something I'm definitely not used to when baking is having to let things chill before they go into the oven. So that was definitely something I was worried about doing wrong. I wasn't sure how cold something was supposed to be before it goes into the oven. Was I supposed to put it in the freezer? Is the fridge okay? How long should I leave it in the fridge? Because both the puff pastry and the compote have to be cold, not just lukewarm. They have to be cold before they go into the oven. So I was a little worried that I was going to do that wrong, but I think it came out okay in the end. I'm still not entirely sure what to tell you guys, but again, Claire's directions were so thorough and lovely. I wouldn't have known to poke holes in the puff pastry at the bottom, and also to avoid the edge with the holes. I would have gone all the way, you know, if I knew to make holes, I would have taken them all the way to the edge, and I wouldn't have known unless I had seen and heard her instructions on how to correctly do this. So again, props to Claire for being not only a great content creator, but an amazing teacher when it comes to actually being so thorough with the videos and the verbal directions. Because again, I'm a total novice. And again, I don't really know how many holes I was supposed to poke. I went overboard because I was, again, afraid I was going to do it wrong. And I guess the more the merrier in my eyes. But this was a super fun little day project for me to take on, and I'm really glad that I did it. Then I'm just going in with my egg wash like she did. She used a really thick, almost like it wasn't opaque, but it was like almost a golden sugar. It was like that really thick baker's sugar, not powdered sugar, but like the really thick kind. And I just used regular white sugar on the rim, but it tastes really good. It doesn't look as pretty as hers did in terms of like the nice big chunks of sugar, and I'm sure it's not as crunchy as hers is on the rim, but I think that the white sugar worked out really well. So if you don't have access to that big granulated sugar, plain table sugar or whatever you use it should be fine, theoretically. Here you can see me unloading 6 apples. I only ended up cutting up 5, and 5 was still way too many, but I would have rather been safe than sorry and had to stop in the middle of adjusting my apples, because once the apples are fanned out over top of the compote, I assume it has to go immediately into the oven while everything is still cold. Again, instructions unclear, my hand is caught in the toaster. I am not good at baking. My intuition with baking is not very good. I need to stick with very strict timers and everything like that, and I need to watch my cooking videos like 9 times before I even start cooking, or it all goes horribly awry. And that's with anything, with like cookies or cake or muffins or banana bread. Like, I can't just do it. I have to have it like right in front of me before I'm able to like complete the task of baking, because it's just not something that's in my wheelhouse. But again, Claire was such an amazing teacher in this video that I felt really confident going into it, even though I was a little nervous about certain parts, like chilling the dough and chilling the compote and making sure everything was the right temperature. And, you know, once it goes into the oven, you're supposed to adjust the temperature really quickly and make sure that it doesn't burn. And I wanted to make sure the bottom baked all the way through and that my compote wasn't too watery. And, you know, I wasn't sure what the extra sugar would do to it. And I was just really nervous all around. But even those little tweaks that I had to make, and even like using different apples that aren't necessarily baking apples, they're just sort of delicious all on their own, really sweet, really crispy, really delicious. They baked up really well for being something that I assume is not supposed to be a baking apple. I'm pretty sure baking apples are supposed to be like tart, right? They're supposed to be not super sweet, but these are really sweet when you eat them, so I'm pretty sure that these aren't meant to be baked into things. But again, I think this turned out super well, and it allowed me to experiment with a new set of skills, and I'm really grateful that I did this. And if you have something that you want to do that you're nervous to do, but you've seen someone who's really good at it, and you're like, oh dang, I wouldn't be that good at it, this is your sign to go do that thing, because I'm not good at baking, and this turned out so amazing. And I mean, just look at those colors, even before it's assembled. Like, the color is just stunning on that tray. You can't see my face in this shot, and that's on purpose, because I am literally sweating about if this is supposed to be put back in the freezer before I put it in the oven, or if this is an okay temperature for it to be before it goes in. I was like really sweating about this. I was so nervous that this was going to be the thing that took me down. I was also really nervous that my compote wasn't going to cook right, or that it would be too watery and ruin the pastry underneath. Again, these are all things that Claire made explicitly clear in the video would not happen if you did it the right way, so I was really nervous that I was going to do it the wrong way. On to the fun part, which was arranging the apples. This was such a fun little activity, and if you have kids, I highly recommend making this with them, or maybe not. It's a really involved process, and you know, you have to heat sugar up, and it may be kind of dangerous. I don't know, maybe don't do this with kids, but this part would be fun to do if you enjoy the presence of children, because it's basically just fanning out little apple slices on top of the pastry, and it's really fun, and it looks really pretty, and you can snack on the raw apple slices while you go, so you can sort of trick them into having a healthy snack while you're baking a dessert, which I think is kind of the point of parenting at some points. And arranging them is just really fun. I went for sort of this cool square pattern with my apples and just kind of lightly pressed them into the compote so they wouldn't go anywhere. Again, I cut way too many of these slices for the size of Apple Tart, but I ended up having a nice big apple snack, and my dogs definitely loved how many apples I cut. I definitely don't think that the wildlife outside minds either, with the pure excess of apple that they got. I was also really nervous about baking the raw apples on top of my delicious compote and puff pastry, because again, I wasn't sure what this is gonna taste like at the end. I've had apple pie and everything like that, but that involves like a filling where the apples don't go into the product raw like this. But with the glaze that Claire recommended to put on top right before it goes into the oven, that I think helped so much. It's just a mixture of melted butter, unsalted butter, and apple cider, which again, I used sweetened cider, but she used unsweetened, and it really did make the apples this wonderful texture. It didn't dry them out, it didn't make them leathery or hard, it just sort of made them like soft but not mushy, so they're not like that gross gritty texture that some apples can be. it was just such a beautiful texture, and they're so delicious, and the natural sugar in there really, really helped. I think if I had used a more tart apple, this may not have worked, but with the sweetness of those apples, I think they just baked by themselves so wonderfully that I really, really am so thrilled with how this turned out. This is another part I was nervous for. It's supposed to go in at 425, so it gets that blast of hot air, and then immediately you're supposed to drop the temp to 350, I believe, to finish off baking them for 40 minutes. I needed actually a little bit less than 40 minutes. I think it's because my pastry was a little bit thinner than hers was. But overall, I mean, look at the results. This is so incredible and so delicious. I didn't try this for you on camera, but I was literally shaking. You can kind of see it in my camera work at the end here because it was a 4-hour process with letting it chill and everything like that. But it was so worth it. The flavor is better than any apple pie I've ever had. It's better than any dessert I've ever had. And I made this basically all by myself with the help of Claire. And again, I just want to encourage you guys to try something new or try something that you don't think that you're going to be good at. And just give it a try, give it a whirl, invest in yourself. And if that means spending 4 hours making an apple tart from almost scratch, I think you should do it because it's fun and it's new and exciting. And you're worth it. Well, obviously, I will link Claire's video in the description below because I am not going to teach you how to make this. This is just aesthetic footage and motivational speaking over top of it. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I will see you in the next one. Please subscribe if you haven't and leave me a comment telling me something that you didn't think you'd be good at, but you went ahead and tried anyways, and it turns out you rock. Leave me that comment and I will be sure to respond in kind with some other things that I've been up to recently. I love talking with you guys in the comments, but I will see you in my next video. Bye!